My husband kicked me out of the house the day after his father's funeral, saying that now that he had inherited $28 million, I was dead weight to him. He didn't know that his father had included a special clause in his will. "Pack your shit and get out. You're useless to me now." Those were the words my husband Derek spoke to me as I stood in the doorway of our Boston townhouse, still wearing the black dress from his father's funeral 3 days earlier. Behind him, his sister Monica leaned against the kitchen counter with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth like she'd just won the lottery. My name is Rachel. I'm 35 years old, and until that moment, I'd spent the last 13 years of my life being the perfect wife. I'd abandoned my career as a marketing director to support Derek through law school. I'd spent 4 years nursing his father Robert through aggressive cancer treatments and his slow, painful decline. I'd endured countless Sunday dinners with his toxic family members who treated me like the help. And this was my reward. "Derek, what are you talking about?" My voice came out small, confused. "This is our home." "Was your home," Monica interjected, practically glowing with malicious joy. "Dad left everything to Derek, the estate, the investment portfolio, the properties, all of it. And Derek's decided he doesn't need a parasite dragging him down anymore." I looked at my husband, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd married, but his eyes were cold, distant, like I was a stranger who'd overstayed her welcome at a party. "The attorney read the will yesterday," Derek said flatly. "I inherited $28 million in assets, the Boston townhouse, the lake house in New Hampshire, the stock portfolio, everything. And I've decided it's time we went our separate ways." My knees felt weak. "Separate ways? Derek, we've been married for 13 years. 13 wasted years," he cut me off, standing up and moving toward me. "Let's be real here, Rachel. You haven't worked since I started law school. You have no income, no career, nothing. You've been living off my father's money this whole time. Now that he's gone, there's no reason to keep up the charade." "Charade?" The word barely made it past my lips. Monica laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, please. You think we didn't know what you were doing? You married Derek because you saw dollar signs. A struggling marketing manager who hooked a guy from a wealthy family? Everyone knew you were a gold digger from day one." "That's not true," I said. But even as the words came out, I realized how pointless they were. These people had already written my story, decided who I was and what I was worth. "I want you out by Sunday," Derek said, turning his back to me dismissively. "Take your personal belongings, but that's it. The furniture, the jewelry I bought you, the art, it all stays. Consider it payment for the years of free rent." I stood there, frozen in place, trying to process what was happening. This man I'd loved, who I'd sacrificed my career for, who I'd cared for during his own health scare 3 years ago, was throwing me away like garbage the moment he inherited money. "Where am I supposed to go?" I heard myself ask, hating how defeated I sounded. "Not my problem anymore," Derek said without even looking at me. "You're smart, right? That's what you always told everyone. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Maybe actually get a job for once." Monica stepped closer, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "My brother has been carrying you for over a decade, Rachel. Time to grow up and support yourself. You know, like adults do." I wanted to scream at them, to tell them exactly what I thought of their cruelty, to remind Derek of every sacrifice I'd made, every late night I'd spent at the hospital with his father while Derek was too busy with work. But instead, I walked silently to the bedroom and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. There was only one person I could call. "Marcus, it's Rachel. I need your help." Marcus Chen had been my attorney and friend since college. He'd handled our prenuptial agreement when Derek and I got married, something Robert had insisted on that seemed like a formality at the time. I'd barely read it, too caught up in wedding planning and the excitement of starting my new life. "Rachel, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "Derek just kicked me out. His father died last week and left him everything, $28 million in assets, and now he's telling me I have 48 hours to pack my things and leave." There was a long pause. Then Marcus did something completely unexpected. He laughed, not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, almost delighted laugh that went on for several seconds. "Marcus, this isn't funny," I said, feeling tears burn behind my eyes. "Oh, Rachel," he said, still chuckling, "I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at your husband. Is he really that stupid?" "What do you mean?" "Check your email in 10 minutes. I'm sending you something that's going to change your entire day. Trust me." He hung up before I could ask anything else, leaving me sitting on the edge of the bed, Derek's cruel words still echoing in my ears, and a tiny flicker of hope beginning to spark in the darkness. I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for Marcus's email. The bedroom felt alien now, like I was already a ghost haunting a space that no longer belonged to me. Through the door, I could hear Derek and Monica laughing, their voices carrying a celebratory edge that made me feel sick. My mind drifted back through the years to all the moments I'd convinced myself were just normal marital struggles. But now, looking back with clear eyes, I could see the pattern I'd been too blind to recognize. Derek and I met at a legal conference in Philadelphia 14 years ago. I was 21, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and a job at a small advertising agency. He was 26, charming and ambitious, working at a small firm while finishing law school at night. His father, Robert, owned a successful investment management company, though they weren't extravagantly wealthy back then. I fell hard for Derek. He was confident, attentive, full of plans for our future. He talked about partnership, about building a life together as equals. When he proposed, after 18 months, I said yes without hesitation. The problems started small. His mother had died when Derek was young, and Robert had remarried a woman named Patricia who brought Monica into the family. Monica was 4 years younger than Derek, entitled and spoiled, and she made her opinion of me clear from our first meeting. "You're from where? Some nowhere town in Ohio?" she'd said at our engagement party, looking me up and down like I was wearing thrift store clothes instead of the dress I'd saved 3 months to buy. How quaint. I'm sure you'll get used to our lifestyle eventually. Robert had insisted on the prenuptial agreement. At the time, I'd signed it without much thought. I had nothing to protect anyway. The terms seemed simple. If we divorced, we'd each keep what we brought into the marriage plus an equal split of any assets acquired together during the marriage. What I didn't know was that Robert had included other provisions, clauses that Marcus had advised me about, but that I'd barely skimmed, too excited about the wedding and our future. After we married, I threw myself into being supportive. Derek's career was demanding, and Robert expected him to prove himself before taking on more responsibility at the firm. I worked my marketing job for the first 3 years, but Derek started complaining. "Rachel, do you really need to work?" he'd said one night after I'd missed one of Robert's dinner parties because of a client presentation. "We don't need your salary. My income is more than enough, and it's important that you're available when I need you." I'd resisted initially, but he wore me down with guilt and logic. His family expected certain things. My salary was modest compared to his. Wouldn't I be happier without the stress? Finally, I'd agreed, telling myself it was temporary, that I'd return to marketing once we had kids and they were in school. The kids never came. We tried for years, went through 3 rounds of IVF that were emotionally devastating and physically exhausting. Derek grew more distant with each failed cycle and eventually stopped discussing it altogether. "Maybe it's not meant to be," he'd said after the 3rd failed attempt. "Kids are expensive anyway, they just complicate our lives." I'd been heartbroken, but I buried that grief and focused on being the perfect wife in other ways. I organized dinner parties for his colleagues, attended every family function, smiled through Monica's constant barbs about my easy life living off Derek's income. Then Robert got sick. Pancreatic cancer, aggressive and brutal. Patricia made it clear immediately that she had no interest in being a caregiver. Monica was too busy with her social calendar to help. Derek was swamped at the firm, working 70-hour weeks. So it fell to me. For 4 years, I coordinated Robert's medical appointments, managed his medications, drove him to chemotherapy sessions, and sat with him during his darkest moments. I learned to change IV lines, manage pain medications, and navigate the complex healthcare system. I gave up any remaining semblance of a social life. Derek praised my dedication occasionally. "You're doing great with Dad," he'd say between conference calls. It really means a lot to him, to all of us. I'd believed him. I thought I was building something, strengthening family bonds, proving my worth, creating a foundation that would last. Even when Monica made comments about me being Robert's free nurse, I ignored her, telling myself that Derek appreciated me, that his opinion was all that mattered. Robert died 3 weeks ago. The funeral was last Tuesday, a somber affair where I stood beside Derek while he delivered a moving eulogy about his father's legacy. Monica sobbed dramatically on Derek's other side, while Patricia sat stone-faced in the front row. Yesterday, the attorney read the will. Derek said it was just a formality, that Robert's affairs were straightforward. He came home quiet and withdrawn, and I'd given him space to process his grief. I should have known something was wrong when Monica showed up this morning with that triumphant smile. My phone buzzed. Marcus's email had arrived. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart pounding. The subject line read, "Read this very carefully." The email contained a single attachment, a PDF of Robert's will. But it wasn't the will itself Marcus wanted me to see. It was a highlighted section on page 9, buried in the legal language. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, each reading making my pulse race faster. All assets, properties, and financial instruments bequeathed to Derek Michael Thompson are subject to the following mandatory condition: any sale, transfer, or disposal of said assets exceeding $50,000 in aggregate value within the first 24 months following the testator's death requires written authorization from Derek's spouse, Rachel Ann Thompson, witnessed and notarized by an independent legal party. Failure to obtain such authorization prior to any transaction renders said transaction void and triggers immediate forfeiture of 80% of all inherited assets to Rachel Ann Thompson, with the remaining 20% to be distributed to designated charitable organizations as specified in Addendum C. I stared at the words, reading them again and again. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. Below the highlighted section was a message from Marcus. "Rachel, Robert added this clause 4 years ago, right after you started taking care of him full-time. He never told Derek because he wanted to see if his son would value you when money was involved, or if Derek would show his true character. Apparently, Derek just showed his character in spectacular fashion. Don't tell him about this yet. Let him make his moves. Every asset sale, every major transaction he attempts without your authorization will trigger the forfeiture clause. And trust me, a man who just inherited $28 million isn't going to sit on it. He'll start moving money immediately. Call me when you're ready. We're going to make sure your husband regrets every word he said to you today. P.S. Check the property deed for your townhouse. Robert never transferred it to Derek. It's been in a trust with you as the sole beneficiary since year 5 of your marriage. Your husband just kicked you out of your own house." I had to cover my mouth to keep from making a sound. The bedroom spun around me as the implications sank in. Robert had known. That kind, quiet man I'd cared for during his illness had seen what I'd been too close to see. He'd seen his son's true nature and had quietly, carefully built protections for me. My phone buzzed again with another text from Marcus. "By the way, Derek's already contacted his broker about selling $6 million in stocks. Should clear tomorrow. That's well over the threshold. The moment that sale completes without your written, notarized authorization, the forfeiture clause triggers automatically. Everything transfers to you. Let him dig his own grave." I stood up from the bed, my legs steadier now. The crushing despair I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by something cold and focused. Through the door, I could hear Derek on the phone. "Yeah, I know. Finally free from that dead weight. I'm already talking to the broker about liquidating some assets, going to buy that yacht I've had my eye on. No, she'll be gone by Sunday. Good riddance." I walked quietly down the hallway, staying out of sight, listening as Derek continued his call. 13 years of pretending to give a shit about her boring marketing stories and her constant neediness. At least Dad's inheritance makes it all worthwhile. Monica's already planning a party to celebrate. In the kitchen, Monica was also on her phone, her voice carrying clearly. It's perfect timing. Derek's been wanting to dump Rachel for years, but Dad kept guilt-tripping him about everything she did for the family. Well, Dad's gone now, and so is the deadweight. We can finally enjoy the money properly. I slipped back into the bedroom and texted Marcus. How long do I wait before telling him? His response came immediately. As long as you want. The clause is ironclad. The more transactions he makes, the more violations he racks up. But I'd recommend letting him complete at least one major sale. Makes the legal case absolutely bulletproof. Plus, it'll be more satisfying when he realizes what he's done. How long do I have to keep quiet? Until the money transfers. Once the forfeiture triggers, it's automatic. But the longer you wait, the more he'll spend and commit to, which means the fall will be that much harder. I looked around the bedroom at all the expensive furniture, the designer bedding, the artwork Derek had bought to impress his colleagues. None of it mattered. What mattered was that I'd loved someone who'd never loved me back, who'd seen me as useful until I wasn't. But Robert had seen more. Robert had known his son was capable of this, and he'd made sure there would be consequences. I pulled out my suitcase and started packing, deliberately making noise. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe I was broken and defeated, ready to disappear into whatever sad future they'd imagined for me. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Just confirmed. Derek initiated sale of $6.5 million in stocks this morning, set to clear Friday. That's well over the $50,000 threshold. The moment that sale completes without your notarized authorization, the forfeiture clause activates. Everything transfers to you within 30 days. What about the yacht he mentioned? He put a deposit down 2 hours ago, $300,000. Also bought a Tesla this afternoon, $95,000, paid cash from his personal account, which will be empty once the forfeiture happens. I typed back, and the townhouse? 100% yours. Robert transferred it to an irrevocable trust with you as beneficiary 5 years ago. Derek has no ownership stake whatsoever. He literally just kicked you out of your own property. I had to sit down. The scale of Robert's protection was breathtaking. He'd seen this coming years ago and had quietly built a safety net without anyone knowing. I zipped up my suitcase and walked out of the bedroom. Derek was in the hallway, and he looked at me with something like satisfaction. "Smart choice, Rachel. I knew you'd see reason." I smiled at him, a real smile that probably confused him. "Oh, Derek, I said softly, you have absolutely no idea what's about to hit you. I left him standing there looking puzzled, walked out the front door of my townhouse, and drove to a hotel downtown. The real story was just beginning. I checked into the Hilton near Boston Common, choosing a modest room even though I could have afforded better. Marcus had advised me to keep a low profile, to let Derek believe his plan was working perfectly while we documented every move he made. The psychology here is crucial, Marcus had explained over the phone that first night. Your husband thinks he's gotten away with something. He's going to act accordingly, spending money and making plans. Every action he takes without your authorization is another violation of the will's terms. Over the next week, I watched Derek's financial activity through updates from Marcus, who had contacts at the brokerage firm willing to share information about transactions that would soon be very relevant to a legal case. The $6.5 million stock sale cleared on Friday just as predicted. Derek immediately wired funds for the yacht purchase, $2.8 million total. He also bought a luxury condo in Miami as an investment property, another $1.7 million. And he booked a month-long trip to the Mediterranean for him and Monica, first-class flights and 5-star hotels totaling $75,000. He's not wasting any time, I murmured to Marcus, scrolling through the documentation he'd sent. They never do. Men like Derek think money makes them untouchable. They think they can do whatever they want without consequences. My phone rang. Derek's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message.
Rachel, we need to talk about the divorce. I'm willing to be generous. I'll give you $75,000 to help you get back on your feet, but I need you to sign the papers quickly. My attorney's drawing them up now. Let's handle this like adults. Call me back. $75,000 out of $28 million? The generosity was stunning. I called Marcus instead. He wants me to sign divorce papers, offering me $75,000. Marcus laughed that delighted laugh again. Let him send them. We'll review them, find every manipulative clause, every lowball tactic. Meanwhile, he keeps spending money that's already legally yours. This just gets better. The divorce papers arrived by courier the next day. Marcus and I reviewed them in his office, a modern space in Boston's financial district with views of the harbor. This is insulting, Marcus said, flipping through the pages. He's claiming you made no contributions to the marriage, that all assets are his separate property, and that $75,000 is generous compensation for 13 years. Can he argue that? He can argue anything he wants. Doesn't mean a judge will agree. But look at this. He pointed to a specific clause. He's asking you to waive all claims to Robert's estate, which means on some level he suspects you might have rights. He's trying to get you to sign them away. What do I do? Nothing yet. Let him think you're considering it. Meanwhile, we document every transaction. Has he made any other major purchases? I showed him the latest updates. Derek had sold another $4 million in stocks that morning and was negotiating to buy a share in a friend's restaurant venture, another $800,000. He's also talking about buying out his law firm partner, I added, wants to be the sole owner. That would cost around $3 million. Marcus leaned back, looking more satisfied than I'd ever seen him. Rachel, your husband is an idiot. Every single one of these transactions violates the will's terms. We could trigger the forfeiture clause right now, but we wait, I finished. Let him dig deeper. Exactly. The more he spends and commits to, the more devastating it'll be when everything collapses. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the years I'd spent trying to be enough for Derek, trying to earn his love and respect through service and sacrifice. How had I been so blind? But I also thought about Robert, sitting in his chair during those long afternoons when I'd read to him or helped him with physical therapy exercises. He'd seen what I couldn't see. You're too good for him,
Robert had said to me once, about 6 months before he died. We were in the garden, watching the sunset, and he'd been unusually contemplative. My son doesn't appreciate what he has in you. He never has. Robert, that's not true, I'd protested automatically. Derek loves me. Does he? Robert had looked at me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Or does he love what you do for him? There's a difference, Rachel, an important difference. I hadn't understood then, but I understood now. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I stayed at the hotel, kept a low profile, and let mutual friends see me looking sad and defeated when I ventured out. The story spread quickly. Poor Rachel, dumped after years of devotion, struggling to figure out her next steps. Meanwhile, Derek was living his fantasy life. His social media told the story. Photos of the new yacht, the Miami condo, expensive dinners at Boston's finest restaurants. Monica posted constantly, shopping sprees, spa days, celebratory photos with Derek and their friends. One post particularly caught my attention. Derek on his new yacht, champagne glass raised, surrounded by people I vaguely recognized from Robert's firm. New chapter, new life. Sometimes you have to cut loose the anchors holding you back. Here's to freedom and finally living the life I deserve. Dad would be proud. The comments were full of congratulations. Nobody asked about me. Nobody seemed to think there was anything wrong with a man celebrating his divorce days after his father's funeral. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Marcus. Perfect, he replied. His own words will bury him. The turning point came on day 16. I was in the hotel room when Marcus called, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. Rachel, we just hit the jackpot. Derek signed the papers to buy out his law partner. $3.2 million. Transaction clears tomorrow. That puts his total unauthorized spending at over $14 million. Combined with the yacht, the condo, the car, the restaurant investment, he's violated the will's terms so extensively that there's absolutely no legal defense. So what happens now?
Now, we file an emergency motion to freeze all his accounts and trigger the forfeiture clause. With the evidence we have, the unauthorized transactions, his social media posts celebrating getting rid of you, his divorce papers trying to leave you with nothing, the judge will rule in our favor immediately. How fast can you file? I can have everything ready by tomorrow morning. We'll get a ruling within 48 hours. Once that freeze hits, Derek won't be able to touch another penny. His credit cards will stop working, his bank accounts will lock, everything. I thought about Derek on his yacht, probably planning more ways to spend money that was about to disappear. Do it, I said. File everything. One more thing, Marcus added. I pulled the property records on the townhouse. You were right, it's 100% yours. Derek's been living in your property, planning to sell your house. That's technically theft and trespassing. We can file eviction papers alongside everything else. The next morning, Marcus filed a comprehensive legal motion, emergency freeze of all Derek's accounts, activation of the forfeiture clause, eviction notice for the townhouse, and a counterclaim to his divorce petition demanding full disclosure of all assets and transactions. By noon, a judge had reviewed the evidence and granted the emergency freeze. Every account in Derek's name was locked. His credit cards were canceled, his access to the brokerage accounts frozen. The yacht purchase he just completed, the money was trapped in escrow, the sale unable to finalize without account access. The law firm buyout, similarly frozen, leaving Derek in breach of contract with his former partner. And then the calls started. Derek's first call came at 2:47 p.m. I was sitting in the hotel room watching the rain fall against the window when my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring through to voicemail. The message he left was frantic, confused, angry. Rachel, what the hell is going on? All my accounts are frozen. My credit cards don't work. The bank is saying there's a court order. Did you do this? Call me back, now. I deleted the message and blocked his number. He tried calling from Monica's phone, from the law firm, from numbers I didn't recognize. Each call went unanswered.
Finally, at 6 p.m., I received a call from a number I did recognize, Derek's attorney, Howard. I answered on the third ring. Rachel Thompson speaking? Ms. Thompson, this is Howard Brennan, Derek's attorney. I need to speak with you about... All communication should go through my attorney, Marcus Chen. He'll provide you with the documentation explaining exactly what's happening and why. Rachel, please. Derek is panicking. He doesn't understand what's happening. Can't we just... Your client kicked me out of my own house, told me I was useless, and offered me $75,000 out of a $28 million inheritance after 13 years of marriage. Then he spent over $14 million without the legal authorization required by his father's will. Everything that's happening now is a direct consequence of his own actions. There was no authorization requirement. Page 9 of Robert Thompson's will, Section 4, Subsection B. Every transaction over $50,000 required my written, notarized approval. Your client violated that clause 14 separate times. I suggest you read the will more carefully before making false claims. I hung up before he could respond. The court hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. I spent that time moving back into the townhouse with Marcus's help. We changed every lock, installed a new security system, and had Derek's belongings boxed up and moved to a storage unit. Walking through my home, and it was my home legally and completely, felt surreal. Everything looked the same, but everything was different. I wasn't the unwanted wife anymore. I was the owner, and Derek was the one being evicted. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a professional Navy suit. Derek arrived at the courthouse looking haggard, wearing clothes I recognized as being years old. His expensive new wardrobe was inaccessible, locked in the townhouse he could no longer enter. Howard tried one last time to negotiate before we went before the judge. Mrs. Thompson, my client made mistakes. He's willing to admit that. But the forfeiture clause is excessive. Surely we can reach some kind of compromise. No, Marcus said flatly. Your client had every opportunity to follow the will's terms. He chose not to. He chose to kick Rachel out, humiliate her, and spend money that required her authorization. There's nothing to negotiate. The judge, a stern woman in her late 50s named Patricia Okonkwo, listened with increasing impatience as Howard tried to argue that Derek hadn't understood the will's requirements, that the authorization clause was unclear, that the forfeiture penalty was too severe. Finally, Judge Okonkwo held up her hand. Mr. Brennan, let me understand your position. Your client inherited $28 million with one simple condition: obtain his wife's written authorization before making major transactions, correct? Yes, Your Honor, but the clause was buried in legal language. Your client is an attorney. He should know better than anyone to read legal documents thoroughly. Instead, he kicked his wife out of her own home, offered her a pittance in divorce settlement, and spent over $14 million without following the required procedure. Is that correct? Howard's face had gone pale. Your Honor, if I may... You may not. The forfeiture clause is clear, legally sound, and will be enforced. 80% of all inherited assets will transfer to Rachel Thompson within 30 days. The remaining 20% will be distributed to the charities specified in Robert Thompson's will. Derek shot to his feet. Your Honor, please, that's not fair. My father wanted me to have that money. Judge Okonkwo fixed him with a withering stare. Your father wanted you to have that money if you treated your wife with basic respect and followed simple legal requirements. You failed on both counts. Sit down, Mr. Thompson. But I've already made commitments. I bought a yacht, a condo, I signed contracts. Those are your problems, not this court's concern. You made financial commitments with money you didn't actually control. That's called poor judgment, and you'll have to deal with the consequences. She banged her gavel. The forfeiture clause is activated. Case closed. Derek tried to approach me as we left the courtroom, but Marcus stepped between us.
My client has nothing to say to you. Rachel, please, Derek's voice cracked. We can still work this out. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Please, just... I looked at him one final time. He looked broken, desperate, nothing like the confident man who'd kicked me out 2 weeks earlier. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pity, no anger, just a vast, peaceful emptiness where my feelings for him used to be. You told me I was useless and to get out of your life, I said quietly. So that's what I'm doing. You're out of my life, Derek. Forever. I walked away and didn't look back. The asset transfer took exactly 30 days, just as Judge Okunko had ordered. I watched as the numbers appeared in my accounts. Stocks, investment portfolios, the proceeds from the frozen yacht sale that Derek could no longer complete, the Miami condo that reverted to the estate and was liquidated. The final total came to $22.4 million after legal fees and the charitable distributions. Derek's financial situation was catastrophic. The law firm buyout he'd signed fell through, leaving him in breach of contract. His former partner sued him for $500,000 in damages. The yacht purchase collapsed, and the broker kept his deposit. He defaulted on multiple commitments, destroying his reputation in Boston's legal community. Monica blamed him for everything, furious that the money she'd been counting on had disappeared. Their relationship imploded, and she moved to California, refusing to speak to him. Derek ended up selling his law practice share for a fraction of its value to cover his debts, then taking a job at a mid-size firm in Providence. His social media went dark. The friends who'd celebrated his freedom vanished when he could no longer afford the lifestyle. I sold the Boston townhouse eventually, too many painful memories. I bought a beautiful Victorian in Portland, Maine, overlooking the water, and quietly restarted my marketing career, surprised by how quickly my skills and confidence returned. I also established the Robert Thompson Foundation, dedicated to protecting vulnerable spouses in estate situations and providing resources for people escaping financial abuse. It felt like the right way to honor the man who'd protected me. 6 months after the court ruling, I received one final letter from Derek, delivered through Marcus.
Rachel, I know you'll probably never read this, but I need to write it anyway. You were right about everything. I was cruel, selfish, and stupid. My father saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and he tried to teach me through consequences I was too arrogant to imagine existed. I lost everything because I didn't value what actually mattered. The money, the status, the lifestyle, none of it meant anything compared to what I threw away. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything or change what I did, but I want you to know that I finally understand what Dad was trying to show me. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Derek. I read it once, filed it with all the other legal documents from our case, and never thought about it again. Derek spent the next several years rebuilding his career from scratch, his reputation permanently damaged by the court case and his treatment of me. Monica never returned from California, still bitter about the inheritance she'd counted on. His attempts to reconnect with Robert's old colleagues failed when word spread about how he'd violated his father's final wishes. As for me, I built a life that was entirely mine. The foundation grew, helping dozens of people navigate complex estate situations and financial abuse. I dated eventually, carefully, but I wasn't in a rush. I'd learned that my own company was worth more than any relationship built on obligation. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about Robert and the extraordinary gift he'd given me. Not just money, but the knowledge that someone had seen my worth when I couldn't see it myself. He'd known his son's true character and had protected me from it even from beyond the grave. That was the real inheritance, and it was worth more than any amount of money. Looking back, I realized the best revenge wasn't destroying Derek. It was discovering that I'd never needed him at all. I'd spent 13 years thinking I was incomplete without him, that my worth was tied to being his wife. Robert taught me differently. He taught me that my kindness, my dedication, my strength, those things had value, and anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve to be in my life. The money was nice, but the freedom, that was priceless.